So who here has built or contributed to a plugin in Confluence? Few people, maybe a third. So I'm going to talk about how you can build larger applications using Confluence plugins. So in general, the plugins that I've seen, and most plugins are enhancing a small piece of functionality within Confluence. I'm going to talk about larger scale things. I'm going to flip my slide if this works. No? OK. I'll press the button. So this is my agenda. I'm going to talk about why you should build on Confluence. You could build on lots of things. Why Confluence, the advantages it's going to give you. I'm going to run through a small sample architecture that you might want to use for your application, talk about your target audience, and then at the end, the road ahead, which direction we're going with Confluence in general. So why would you want to build on Confluence? At Atlassian, we're talking about a lot of new products that we're always spiking new things, and the normal thing you want to decide at the beginning is what do you build upon. Generally, this is going to be some sort of web framework, often a whole stack, and Confluence has now got to the stage where we're often considering building new products on top of Confluence as a platform. So we don't have anything to show you yet, but that's the direction we're going. And I'm going to talk about whether you want to do that and what benefits it's going to give you. Generally, the sorts of applications that lend themselves to being good on Confluence are things that Confluence is good at. So it's free-form content, generally collaborative, content-driven applications. They're going to get the most benefit out of Confluence. A no-brainer as well, if your target audience is already using Confluence, is used to using it, then it's probably a good idea to build something on top of it because it's going to be easy for them to use. They're already there, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not going to lie, it's not perfect for building everything. Very structured data, it's not good for. As I said, free form, it's awesome. Structured data, it's not so good. My first point here is structured data storage needs. You want to avoid Confluence. So if your data storage is a typical relational database style storage, then you don't want to use Confluence at the moment because it doesn't support that. We're looking at that, and we want to solve that problem, and I'm going to talk about that a bit towards the end. But currently, if you want to build your accounting software or something, don't try and build on Confluence. The other 2 points I've got are specific. If you have specific requirements, specific needs. So if you need to, I don't know, build upon some Ruby library, or you need to integrate with some Python thing, and we don't support it, then it's probably not a good idea to use Confluence. Or if you're getting to the point where you're having to customize Confluence itself, if you're building something and you're having to recompile Confluence or something like that, or I don't know, swap out some classes, then it's probably a bad idea to use it. But in general, it's fairly flexible. I'm going to briefly summarize the advantages that you're going to get if you do use Confluence, and also touch on the development. I don't know, a lot of people here seem to have used it, but it is very easy, and so I'm going to go over some of the simple use cases of the development. So the persistence for storing your bits of data in Confluence are mainly the ones I've got listed up here. So pages and blogs, comments, and attachments for binary storage. They're the primary things. There's also other things you can use, mail and user status and various other bits you can put in there. Bandana I've got here as well, which should be familiar to most plugin developers. It's effectively a key value store where you can store bits of data in there. So generally, the standard Java classes can be serialized and put into there, so you can store plugin-specific things. It's definitely limited at the moment, and I found it very limiting, and I've made some improvements to that, which I'll get into later. One of the benefits is if you use these are you get automatic versioning. Other than Bandana, you get versioning across all this content you stored. Import and export. It's very easy to export this content as XML with the standard Confluence tools and import it into another wiki, which is a huge benefit if you're using Confluence already. If you're not, it's still useful, I suppose. Backup and restore you also get for free. So these are, if you basically, if you use any of the stuff on the top, you get the stuff on the bottom for free. Confluence is also very good for content discovery. Because it's a collaborative tool, we have various ways of, I suppose, exposing one content of this piece of the system to another piece of the system, and generally federating out content. And this will flow through if you build your stuff on top of it. So the standard thing here is labels. So labeling, tagging, that's all standard in Confluence. There's hidden system labels. So if you write an application, you can label various bits and specific to your application, so you can find them, but users won't see those labels. There's global labels, such that users and everyone can see that this thing is being labeled, and there are user labels, so labels specific to a user. All of these things are easily available in the API. Whether you use them or not, you get a number of other benefits for putting your stuff into Confluence, your application. We have RSS feeds, so any new content that gets updated, etc., you get feeds for free. So if someone wants to see that this stuff is being updated, they get a feed for it. Search, everything is searchable. They get notifications when things change. And there are real-time activity streams you can see in the UI. So these are sort of awesome things which normally if you're building your own app on some other framework, you're probably going to have to build these yourself. So you get all this stuff for free. We also integrate with a number of other systems. So I've got a few things on the slide here. Microsoft Office support. We support integration to a number of external systems, such as all the other Atlassian products. Open social support, so if you design something that goes into a page, you can federate that out, expose that to something else. LDAP support, so which ties into users and groups, authentication and authorization. So all that stuff comes for free. A lot of the time it will do in other web apps, but we give you a little bit more because you have user management stuff. We integrate with various other things. You're also going to get an integrated UI if you build something into Confluence and they already have Confluence or they have other things built onto it. All the UI is going to be integrated, so that's a great thing. You get various UI widgets to help you along with that. There's also a new feature for Confluence 3.3, which is should be out in about a month, hopefully a bit less than that. We have another gadget called the page gadget, so you can export a page, expose that in any other application as a gadget. So we're going to, if you've got your Jira dashboard and you want to see some live update of, I don't know, some Confluence page, some feeds, anything, then you'll be able to do that. And likewise, anything you build on Confluence, you'll get that ability for free too. I'm going to talk about the development now and how easy it is. So for people who haven't actually developed in Confluence, it's very simple. We recently put out the Atlassian plugin SDK. There was a talk on that this morning, so if you need to know more information on that, I'll go into it briefly, but if you need to know more information on that, you can download the slides. It's basically a command line tool, so you can create a project and compile a project, start up Confluence with your plugin in it, or hot upload your plugin into it, so sort of like Rails style stuff, but it's very simple and it makes it very easy to use. The actual development within Confluence is all generally using the newest technologies. We use Spring for dependency injection, so most of the stuff that, the modern stuff that you're used to, you get for free. And hot deployment I mentioned, because I think that's huge. It's very frustrating if you have to restart some app, and all the newer style development frameworks will allow you to hot deploy. And the Atlassian plugin SDK is no different. One command and it will package up your plugin and push it into Confluence, and the code will immediately be running. There's a few other useful parts to the easy development. The UI, we try and make the UI very easy to use, so we have a number of plugin points. You can fully customize the whole UI if you need to, from the whole page down to small widgets within the UI, small areas, or if you you can run JavaScript on any page. If you're happy with that, you can replace or modify any part you want based upon the context of the page. So you have complete control over the UI. We also provide a number of reusable components, so JavaScript components to do various things, forms, drop-downs, which we're adding to all the time to try and unify the experience across the product. And we would encourage any plugin developer to use these too to get the nice look and feel. You get all your nice drop shadows and everything, which we spend ages working on. There's a few other little bits. Internationalization, I don't know if a lot of people use that, but if you don't, doesn't matter, it won't affect you. If you do, it's all built in, very easy to get internationalization into your app. We use it all the time. I thought I'd also mention the shared access layer, which probably most people haven't seen. We have a layer which sits across all our products. So if you want to write a plugin that works in multiple products, it's very easy to do so. You've got a common API to do searching and all sorts of things. My last point about the easy development is there's a lot of help out there for you as well. We definitely regard our third-party developers as a huge part of the company, and the Confluence source code is provided for all commercial licenses, and we have a huge number of open source plugins as well. Over 400 plugins, and you can go and look at the code for most of them and actually see what they're doing. As well as that, we've got online documentations, forums, all this sort of stuff, which should help you out if you ever get in trouble. So next, I'm going to go through an example application. It may be slightly different to the standard application that you would write in another framework. Possibly, possibly not. I'm going to go through a few sections, and there'll be a few code snippets so you can see how easy some of the things are to do. For people who haven't developed plugins, it is very easy. So the first section I'm going to go through is the core of your plugin. So this generally will be your core code, which is founded upon the managers in Confluence, which manage all the persistent storage. So here I have labels, pages, blogs, comments, most of the stuff that I had in the previous slides. And then on top of your core layer, you're probably going to want to have an API so that other plugins can use your stuff. For this part, I mentioned before, you get dependency injection for all your code. So I found a lot when I'm using a third-party system to develop code, there's two things I need to look for. I need to look for the class that I want to use, and then how do I find that class? How do I get a handle on it? You don't have to worry about how to find it here, because anything you want to use in Confluence will be injected into your code for you. So for those who aren't aware of Spring, if I have an example class here, whether I declare it in my constructor or if I just have a setter in my class, I can put a Confluence class there and it will automatically be injected for me. It makes it very easy. We also use OSGI on a slightly higher level for wiring all the plugins together. This is very useful such that if you want to write an application, you may actually want multiple plugins and you may want dependencies between them. This is very easy to do with OSGI. So I have an example snippet here. This will be for those people who haven't written a plugin before. As well as your code, you have a plugin XML file. So there's one definition file which basically tells the plugin system this is all the stuff that needs to run. Here's an example of exporting an interface that other plugins can use. It's very simple code. Here's an export, and additionally, I've listed below import. So if you have another plugin which may depend upon this, you can just ask for import, and once you've imported it, it goes through exactly the same process as any Confluence manager or class, and it will be injected into all your code automatically. So everything gets wired up for you very simply. OSGI itself definitely has a few In general, it's simple. If you want to do complicated things, it can get more complex. If you're interested in it more, there's a talk directly after this about OSGI in particular and the new plugins framework. Everyone's interested in new features, so I've got a few slides here about the new stuff that's, as I mentioned, coming out with Confluence 3.3, which has been specifically designed around building larger scale applications upon Confluence. The stuff that I've used, occasionally I hit a few areas where it was a bit more awkward to build larger scale applications because people hadn't been doing it so much, and so there's definitely some improvements which has been added since. I'll run through these quickly. Commentable objects. Now every object is commentable. So you see in the UI, you see a page and you see a blog post and they have comments below them. Now you can, in the back end, put a comment on anything you like. All the major content objects now are all commentable, which whether you show them in the UI or not, or whether you use that for your own stuff, that's fine. User status is now spaced, and what I mean by that is it's no longer global. It's targeted at a specific space. So if you want to set up, say, a forums application which represents a space, then you might have user statuses based upon that forum, which you can target at that space. And all the security and everything applies to. We have custom space types. So you can, currently there's a personal and global space types. We've allowed additional types which shouldn't show up in the UI, and you can create these to store your new content, and then it's up to you to write a UI or use some of the existing UI to expose that information to the users. And finally, multi-label queries. Previously, you could only query on one label, which isn't so good. If you want to slice and dice your data a bit more, you may want multiple labels. So now you can query by multiple labels to allow you to search your content a lot more easily. I think the biggest new feature that I want to talk about is Bandana. So previously it was this key value store which had huge limitations and it frustrated me a lot. So I've fixed up a lot of things in there. Previously you could store content based upon a context being a space. So that's the bucket of data. So you can throw everything into a space, which isn't ideal if you're developing a plugin, say, for a forum or something, because it may not have a space. Now you have custom storage context, so it could be whatever you like. I think it's identified by a string, so you can put whatever you want in there, create your own contexts. You can now enumerate what you've stored into that context. You couldn't do this before, which was a source of frustration for me. Now you can enumerate all the stuff you stored in there, so if you need to re-index or do something with it, you can list all the stuff. And we also support custom serializers now, so you can store any object. For instance, if you want your own serializer to serialize your own objects, if you don't want to use XML, you want to use JSON or something, you can store all your stuff however you want in using your custom serializer. They don't seem like huge changes, but for people who have really tried to flex Bandana, these should be pretty huge. So next I'm going to move on to the UI part of the application. So the traditional UI is a templated UI, and the framework we use in Confluence is XWork, so a web work framework. We have that with a velocity templating engine on it, and that's for all the dynamic content. And then for the static content, you can define web resources, which basically just get served up as static stuff. This is the traditional UI. I won't spend a long time on this, but here's a simple definition of a velocity file and an action, a web work action to display dynamic content. It's fairly uninteresting stuff. The only thing I'd draw your attention to for people who have written plugins is here's another new feature. On the fourth line, you can define a class with a bean prefix, which allows you to pull beans from a separate Spring file. So if you want to define your beans somewhere else, you can do that and then pull them into this file. You couldn't previously do that, which led to some limitations, but it's boilerplate code, but it's a useful little feature. I have another another new thing, which is for the static content. Previously, you could define as just a standard web resource. You define your CSS, your JavaScript, whatever, it would be pulled in. Now you can define transformers. So if you want to build up your CSS or JavaScript dynamically, you can define a transformer, which will do that. And it will always be cached on the client, so you can have all these nice things, which I don't think many web frameworks give you the ability to do that. The third part I'd like to talk about the architecture is a new style of UI. So I think more and more we're moving away from this templated UI to a more Ajax-y Web 2.0 sort of style UI. And since I've moved to doing more of this stuff, I think it's so much better. You get great benefits out of doing it, and I would encourage anyone who's looking into this to do that sort of thing. So on the client side, we rely heavily on jQuery, which is a JavaScript library which allows you to do a number of things. One of them being make asynchronous calls to render content in the browser. It's a very powerful library if you haven't used it. I didn't like JavaScript much, and then after using jQuery, I'm quite happy to use it. I'm mentioning Atlassian user interface here. These are our standard components, JavaScript components to do drop-downs and all these sort of stuff. This is also available for you on the client, and it actually includes jQuery. So all of that stuff is all sort of packaged up. You can use that. On the server, there are macros you're probably going to want to use to define where your content goes, and the new REST framework. So we had a REST framework. We have a new REST framework now. I think they were both based on Jersey, so anyone who's used Jersey before, there's a similar thing. I'll give you a quick demonstration of how to use it. And the new REST framework too has interceptors, another new thing for anyone who's used the REST stuff already. You can now define interceptors. So if you want authentication or something, or added security, added logging based upon your REST API, you can define that with a custom interface within the REST framework. So I'm going to go through a quick example here to demonstrate how simple it is to write a simple UI which basically just exposes an object on the server in some way on the client. So to define your REST service, one line within your plugin XML. Very simple. You don't need to define where anything is. You just give it the line, and it will scan your classes, scan the bytecode, and find out where all your stuff is, and expose that as an API. So here, all we've had to define basically is the main things are the path and the version, so we know where we can actually go to get the information. Next thing is the object that we want to define, that we want to expose. So I've just defined example entity here. This is simple JAX-B. So any Java devs here familiar with JAX-B? Standard JAX-B, putting the annotations on the fields and on the class. And I have a little box next to it which shows what it will look like if it's serialized as JSON. You can serialize it as XML too, but as JSON it will look like this. In general, you don't need to know what it's going to look like, but it's quite handy. It makes debugging it very easy. Second part is you need to expose this. So I've defined an example resource here to allow you to expose this object out to the client. Again, very simple. Defined with the path. So this is the path relative to the root of your API. And just one method with a get annotation, which basically says, if you call this with get, this is the object you're going to get back. Maybe post or put or delete on there as well. This is standard Jersey stuff, but as you can see, it's very simple. The only slightly different thing is the response.ok.build at the end, but that effectively is just wrapping the thing you want to return in an OK return code as opposed to an error or an authorization required or something. But you can see that code there is pretty simple. That's the server. So moving on to the client, imagine I want to expose that example entity, which had, I think, a name and an ID within a div. Normally I'd have some templated thing, right? But in this situation, I want to fetch it from the client and just insert it into my div. So first I'll define the actual div. Secondly, I'll define a template which to template the object that I'm going to put in the div. So we have something in Atlassian, this is all based upon in our Atlassian JavaScript API, a script type of TextX template, as you can see. So this will not be rendered to the client. It's just a template, so we can put this static content within a static file and then fill that up with various objects. So the template here includes ID and a name, which you can see here, just surrounded by curly braces. Simple stuff, so standard templating stuff. There's nothing magical about this, this format. So we've got the template now, we've got where we need it to go, so now we need to be able to make the call to the server and fill up that template and put it into the actual DOM. This is jQuery syntax. It may look a bit scary at first, but there's not much to it really. It's a simple one method call. I define where I want to get my content. I'm defining the content types going in and out. So in this case, it's just JSON all the time, JavaScript object notation. And upon success, I will be returned that object from the REST resource, and I will get it as an actual object with an ID and a name. Super simple. And all I do here, I could have put this onto 2 lines, but hopefully you can follow with one. I'm AJS template load. I load the previous template I've defined, fill it with the entity object, and it will pick off the name and the ID, populate it with in that template, and create the template with the toString, and then the append part appends it into that example area div. So that's all jQuery code, but it's fairly simple. You're not going to need to know a lot more than that to put your stuff into the div. In general, this is all fairly simple stuff, and you get a great UI. So if you do develop it this way, you get the benefit of a free REST API, which is awesome. You often in the client, you'll want to list out maybe a number of components, and you may list out the components as your API. You'll also probably want to be able to delete them, so you'll create a delete method in your API. Maybe you want to create them too, so you'll create these all in your API in the simple resource just for the UI, and afterwards we've got a free API. Supporting JSON, or all the same API will support XML as well. Depend upon the client's what the client requests. If the client requests XML as content type, or if it appends a .xml onto the request, then they'll get XML. So that's an awesome bit that you get for free. Currently, we're trying to retrofit REST APIs into all our products, but all the newer things, get them for free. Another thing which is great is you get feeds for free. Once you've built the stuff, you know, this is going down a layer below the REST stuff. Once you've built your content in pages and comments, etc., as I mentioned before, you get free. So this is another way of federating out your content that you get as a benefit. The same with the gadgets. The new page gadget that I mentioned, allowing you to expose any of your content as a page, as a gadget, sorry, any page as a gadget, allows you to federate your content again. So if you've got some other system somewhere and you've built your thing in Confluence, it's another free way of doing things. Actually implementing the gadget spec yourself is not simple. So this is a great way to get it for free. So I'm going to briefly talk now about the audience that your application might be targeted to, and the benefits that you may get for actually who you're speaking to, who you're targeting, and what Confluence will give you. So if you're developing for your own organization, if you've already got Confluence deployed, it's a bit of a no-brainer. Everyone still uses it, so it's easy to get them to use it. There's no resource requirements. I mean, maybe use a little bit of CPU extra on on an existing installation, but you don't have to go to IT and get them to get you a new box and get all that stuff set up. And you also already have infrastructure support, which is a huge thing in larger companies. Political support is another big benefit that if Confluence is there, then I'm assuming people like it and it's got support, so why not use it? And it's going to be a lot easier to get your application in. You don't have to jump through all the hoops. If, however, you're looking at a wider audience, you're not developing specifically for your company, you may be developing a commercial plugin or an open source plugin. Confluence has a huge customer base of 22,000, includes starter licenses at the moment, but it's a huge number, so it's a great way to target your plugin. We provide hosting on plugins.atlassian.com for free. Whether it's a commercial or free product, whether it's open source or not, we don't mind. We provide you with free statistics on who's downloaded, all hits, all that sort of stuff. It's also the plugins page is the most visited page on www.atlassian.com. So plugins have a huge audience. We'll also give you, if your plugin is awesome, then we're quite happy to blog about it, give you some free marketing. And we also have other things such as CodeGeist, some people may be aware of, which is a competition. So every year, I think it is, the best plugins, we give some money, I think, to the winner to encourage more development. And we also have Atlas Camp, which is an annual, I believe, sort of developer get-together where like-minded people and a lot of Atlassian staff get together and build things and talk about how the system can be improved. So there's a lot of support there. So the direction Confluence is going in, I'd like to touch on now. We currently have a REST API, and the whole company's vision is to create full REST APIs for all our products. We're not yet there. Confluence has a read-only REST API exposing most of the content, but we are intending to have a full read-write REST API for everything, and as it goes with all the products. This should be incredibly useful for if you build your application on Confluence, because then you've automatically got a big API, all your content will be accessible via an API already. So it's more free stuff for your app. We're also investing in unified app links, which may have been touched on in other talks, I'm not sure. It's a method of configuring links between applications. So maybe it's Confluence to Jira, maybe it's Confluence to your custom app. It doesn't matter whether the app is Atlassian or not, but it allows automated authentication between the two. So I can say, I've got another application, it supports OAuth, or it supports some other application, maybe it's basic authentication. I can set that up, and then any requests from that application to another will automatically be authenticated if you go through our request factory to create your requests. That's something coming along, which should be in all the products soon. We're also investing heavily in a unified plugin manager. So the plugin manager in Confluence is already pretty good. It's better than the other products, but we've got an even better one that's coming into all the products, and it's going to expose plugins a lot more easily. It will allow you also to tell if you upgrade, what's going to break. So all these other benefits, and any plugin, we'll host it for free, as I mentioned, on plugins@atlassian.com, and it will appear in the plugin manager for any potential customers. The last point I wanted to talk about the road ahead, which I alluded to earlier, was the structured data storage. So currently we use Bandana for our data storage. If you have some custom storage, you don't want to store it in a specific Confluence object type. It definitely has its limitations. So we are looking into improving that. There's a few different ways we're thinking of doing that, using various libraries, but effectively we want to enable you to store specific objects of your own type within Confluence and allow you to query across them as you would any database. This will also fall into the backup and restore, and you'll get all this other stuff for free. We're not there yet, but we're working on it, and we're going to have that at some point soon. So in summary, I've mentioned that content-based and collaborative applications, they get a huge number of benefits out of building our Confluence. I've shown how easy development is, those simple snippets, and also given you a quick example application based upon REST and shown you the target audiences and how you may benefit to reach your audience. So we've learned that for Confluence rocks for small content-driven applications. Does anyone have any questions?
Quick question. Is Bandana 3 meant to replace the content property entry data? You know, the attributes attached to a page or a blog post?
No.
So are you planning on doing anything then? You know, give me the query, give me the list of keys for a content entity? Or
no, we're not. If you could use that as a key if you wanted. If you have a specific piece of content, you can use that. For instance, all content has a unique ID. Whether it's a page or a blog post, the IDs are different across all of them. So you can use that as a key for your stuff, and you can store that in Bandana. But in general, we're not. That's effectively storing things against an object is a feature which we're not encouraging people to use.
Okay.
Anyone else?
Are there any plans anytime soon to add label support for attachments?
That's a hotly requested feature. There's not any immediate plans, no. Currently, the problem with that is that attachments are stored in an entirely separate table. So all the schema requires massive work to change. It's definitely something we've been looking at and we would like to do, but there's no immediate plans to do that yet, I'm afraid.
Do you support wiring of your gadgets together? So if I have a search, and the easiest search to think of is an address-based search. So if I have a gadget that performs that search and does it a certain way, and then I have a mapping object and a preferences object that says, here are the things that I like. For example, I'm interested in sushi restaurants around this address. 2 different gadgets. Can the 3 things be wired together in some form of event mechanism?
I don't know. I think that's... I'm not good enough on the Open Social spec. I assume that's in the Open Social spec. If Open Social supports it, I would hope we do. But I can't answer that, I'm afraid. Any other questions?
I'm wondering about the plugin API, and I've had a case where I had a feature built for Confluence, and they needed to modify the UI, so they created a theme to change the UI. Then I had another feature request and another plugin and a different theme. Now, how do I get those 2 features on the same? So it's like, is there a better way to inject into the existing UI as opposed to having to copy and modify the existing UI?
Yes, there's a number of ways you can modify the theme. So if you replace the root decorator and replace everything, you're gonna run into issues, as you say, when you want to make a second replacement. We have the same issue if we upgrade Confluence and things have changed. You know, we have the same breakages. There's a number of things you can do. So there are depending on where you want to insert your content. If you want to insert it around a specific object, there's a web item point where you can insert links, images around specific content types. There's a new plugin point coming on called a web panel, where we have certain areas on the page where you can put your content in. Or the third option I'd recommend is use jQuery, use JavaScript to basically inject stuff within a page. So if you find anchors and inject your content within there, if you've got 2 scripts that inject at 2 different points, then even at the same point, then you shouldn't have any issues. So I'd recommend using them.
So is that documented, or is that a best practice? Where I'm actually working with Appfire on 2 different plugins, and they didn't have a solution, and they had to implement their own theme where they introduced these injection points for UI, and I thought you must have a better solution for this problem.
Yeah, I would say the JavaScript solution. I don't know if I don't know how well documented it is, I'm afraid.
Do you know what it's called, the new JavaScript stuff? Like instead of a new plugin point where you can add JavaScript to any page.
Web panel.
That's the JavaScript
That's web panel is JavaScript area is a placeholder on the page where you can put arbitrary stuff in. Yeah, so certainly check out the web panel documentation.
Similar. In your example, you had jQuery, and
Yes.
later you had is it AJS?
Yes. So
when do you use either, or can you always assume that jQuery is always in there?
you
The
can
library's there?
So you can always either use jQuery dot, or you can use AJS dot. You cannot always use $dot. So if you I would recommend you always stick with AJS dot, Atlassian JavaScript. Just don't use $.
Is the AJS API documented?
I believe so. Yeah,
And it's
I believe-
supported for?
Yes.
Okay.